For over a decade, the internet's favorite cinematic punchline was that nobody could name a single character from the highest-grossing movie ever made. Critics insisted James Cameron's sci-fi epic had left absolutely zero cultural footprint. But then the sequels arrived, and audiences immediately handed over billions of dollars to return to Pandora. It turns out, betting against James Cameron is the worst financial decision you can make. Cameron famously waited years for motion capture technology to catch up to his imagination, and that patience paid off, to the tune of over $6 billion across 3 films. The original 2009 blockbuster remains the undisputed king of the box office, pulling in nearly $3 billion on its own. While critical reception has slowly dipped from an 81% approval rating down to 66% for Fire and Ash, the sheer theatrical spectacle remains completely unmatched. On the surface, this saga looks like a straightforward fable about greedy invaders destroying a pristine alien world. But as the story pushes deeper into uncharted territories, the clear-cut lines between good and evil begin to violently blur. How exactly does a visionary director take a simple tale of survival and twist it into a sprawling, morally ambiguous epic? The franchise begins by establishing a deliberate, almost simplistic moral binary. The technologically ravenous human RDA stands in stark opposition to the spiritually pure, nature-bound Omaticaya. James Cameron visually cements this purity early on. When Neytiri and Jake are surrounded by the glowing seeds of the sacred tree, the scene is lit with an ethereal, uncorrupted bioluminescence. It is a classic iteration of the noble savage trope, framing the indigenous population as inherently flawless stewards of their environment. But as the saga expands, Cameron systematically dismantles this very illusion. The sequels reject the idea that the Na'vi are a monolithic, morally perfect species, exposing them to the exact same prejudices that plague humanity. In the way of water, this fracture happens on a microscopic, interpersonal level. Eonang and the Metkayina boys ruthlessly bully Kiri and Loak on the beach, specifically targeting their demon-human blood. It is a harsh introduction to interclan xenophobia, proving that cruelty exists even in paradise. By Fire and Ash, this interpersonal prejudice escalates into systemic corruption. The introduction of the Mangquan, the Ash people, shatters the good native trope entirely. When Varang, the Ash people leader, gleefully fires an RDA flamethrower alongside Colonel Quaritch, the visual language of the franchise flips on its head. The indigenous population is no longer just the victim of industrial violence. They are active, willing participants in it, proving that greed and tyranny are universal traits rather than exclusively human ones. This moral decay is mirrored perfectly in the saga's central patriarchal figures. Jake Sully and Miles Quaritch are no longer just opposing soldiers. They are dark reflections of one another, struggling under the crushing weight of fatherhood and the generational trauma of war. Jake's evolution is deeply tragic. He transitions from a liberated hero soaring on a great Leonopteryx to a traumatized, overprotective patriarch. When Jake sternly lectures Netiam and Loak in the jungle, he isn't speaking to his sons. He is commanding his squad. His human military background entirely overtakes his parental instincts, inadvertently alienating his children and setting the stage for Netiam's devastating death. Conversely, Quaritch's resurrection as a recombinant forces an existential crisis that disrupts his one-dimensional xenophobia. He is trapped in the body of the enemy he despises, forced to confront his biological human son, Spider. When Quaritch crushes his own human skull found in the jungle, it is a masterclass in performance capture nuance. He is physically destroying his past, yet he remains tethered to it through his son. Look at the interrogation room scene where Quaritch sits across from Spider, attempting a twisted, manipulative version of father-son bonding. Spider is the ultimate casualty of this mirrored dynamic. He is caught in a brutal tug-of-war, rejecting Quaritch's cruelty but unable to let him drown, while desperately craving Jake's approval. This culminates in Fire and Ash with a staggering test of Jake's morality. Jake holds a glowing blue blade to a kneeling Spider's throat, agonizing over whether to execute the boy to protect his Na'vi family. It is a breathtaking moment of character regression, where Jake is inches away from becoming the very monster he fought in the first film, before finally choosing mercy. While Jake pulls back from the abyss, Neytiri dives headfirst into it. Her character arc is the most harrowing of the entire collection, defined by catastrophic loss and an all-consuming, terrifying maternal rage. In the first film, she is a fierce but open-hearted teacher. When she holds Jake's fragile human body in the link shack, seeing his true form for the first time, her acceptance is absolute, but repeated betrayals and the ruthless destruction of her home permanently harden her. Her hatred for the Sky People calcifies into a deep prejudice that extends directly to Spider. The climax of The Way of Water features Neytiri holding a knife to Spider's throat to force a standoff with Quaritch. She isn't bluffing. Zoe Saldana's performance capture here is feral, completely stripping away the noble veneer of the Omaticaya to reveal a mother hollowed out by grief. By the time Jake tests Spider's loyalty in the third film, Neytiri turns away in tears, unable to watch the execution but entirely unwilling to stop it. To chart this descent from wonder to tragedy, Cameron weaponizes the very biomes of Pandora. The elemental shifts across the films aren't just world-building exercises. They are structural metaphors for the narrative's emotional decay. The first film mastered the lush, vertical canopy of the jungle. It was a playground of discovery, rendered with groundbreaking depth that invited the audience into a pristine, untouched ecosystem. The second film pivots to the ocean, fundamentally revolutionizing underwater motion capture and fluid dynamics. When the massive outcast Tolkun, Payakan, glides through the deep crystal-clear blue, the water interacts with his skin and the surrounding light with unprecedented physical accuracy. But water is also a transitional element. It washes away the past and hides the bodies of the dead. It serves as the fluid battleground where the Sully family's innocence is permanently drowned. Fire and ash violently strips away this fluidity, replacing it with harsh, destructive elements. The film utilizes complex volumetric rendering to create suffocating smoke, flowing lava, and widespread devastation. We see a volcano erupting with thick, dark ash, followed by the desolate, bone-decorated landscape of the Mongquan. The visual effects technology escalates specifically to render ruin. The soft bioluminescence of the jungle is choked out by the aggressive, industrial orange heat of the ash plains, perfectly mirroring the franchise's descent into total war. Amidst this elemental and moral destruction, the franchise anchors its hope in its two most displaced children, Kiri and Spider. They represent the synthesis of Pandora's opposing forces. Kiri's arc deepens the franchise's exploration of Pandoran spirituality. Born mysteriously from Grace Augustine's inert avatar, she acts as a messianic bridge between human scientific reality and Na'vi mysticism. Cameron frames her connection to the planet as visceral and overwhelming. When she lies face down on the sandy ocean floor in The Way of Water, she isn't just observing nature. She is plugging directly into the planet's neural network. This culminates in a profound vision where Kiri floats in a bioluminescent, ethereal space, reaching towards the glowing structure of Awa. She evolves from feeling like an outcast freak to becoming the living embodiment of the planet's will. If Kiri is the spiritual bridge, Spider is the physical one. He is biologically human, but culturally Na'vi, constantly forced to prove his worth to a family that inherently distrusts his DNA. When Spider awakens in the glowing forest and realizes he can breathe Pandoran air without his mask, it is a staggering payoff. It is a mystical validation of his true belonging, proving that Iwa's grace extends beyond genetics. Through Kiri and Spider, Cameron proves that identity on Pandora is not defined by blood or origin, but by the choices made in the face of annihilation. For years, critics joked that this saga left no cultural footprint, pointing to a lack of quotable catchphrases as proof of its irrelevance. But that critique fundamentally misunderstands what James Cameron has built. The legacy of Pandora isn't measured in pop culture trivia, but in the visceral, almost subconscious pull of a world that feels as breathtakingly real and deeply flawed as our own. We don't just watch these blockbusters, we inhabit them, bearing witness to a tragedy that feels uncomfortably close to home. With 2 more chapters on the horizon, including a promised journey back to a dying Earth, the narrative is shifting from the defense of an alien moon to a reckoning for our own species. The ultimate question is no longer whether the invaders will destroy paradise. It is whether paradise will finally teach us how to save ourselves.